Hi everyone, I'm Rincey and this is Rincey Reads. Today I'm going to be doing my December wrap up and I have a lot to talk about, so I'm just going to jump right in. First of all, in case you guys weren't aware or you are new to my channel, I was doing Vlogmas this December. So usually I talk about every video I make during the month, but I'm not going to do it this time around because I have more than 20 videos. So I'm just going to link to my Vlogmas playlist. You can check them all out and see if you missed any of the videos. I love doing Vlogmas, even though it's a lot of work. I think it's just a bunch of fun. I like making content for you guys and I like engaging in conversations about a whole bunch of different topics, and I like making videos that aren't about books, and I like making videos about books obviously too. And yeah, it's just like a fun creative project, and hopefully I can keep doing stuff like this because it's just a fun way to get out all of the video ideas that I have throughout the year that sort of pile up that I don't have time for. Second thing I want to touch upon really quickly is the fact that I have hit 15,000 subscribers. If you follow me on like Twitter or Instagram, you would have already seen this. Thank you to everyone who has subscribed. It's insane to me. Like, I almost started crying at work when I saw the number just because I've been doing this for a while, and it seems obnoxious to say, but BookTube has literally changed a significant portion of my life, and it's insane that that many people have clicked that little subscribe button, even though I know 15,000 people don't watch my videos on a regular basis. The fact that 15,000 different people at a different point in time decided to subscribe to my channel is just craziness. So just thank you to everyone who has subscribed, and in honor of that I'm going to do a little bit of a giveaway. I usually don't do like subscriber milestone things because I don't want to focus too much on subscriber count, because I don't think that's necessarily the most valuable tool to use to, you know, celebrate success or anything like that, but it's hard to ignore the big ones. So I'm doing a little bit of a giveaway. There will be a link in the description to a Gleam form, and basically all it does is it takes your name and your email address, so I have a way of contacting you, and then it just checks to see if you're subscribed to my channel, and then you are entered in the giveaway. It's going to be open for a week, and the prize is you either get to pick the book that I send to you, or you will get a book recommended to you. Like, I'll pick the book out based on like your Goodreads profile or whatever you use to track your reading. So just click the link down below, provide your information. It'll be open worldwide because I can use like Book Depository to send to anywhere in the world, and it'll be open for a week, so feel free to enter. Everyone just gets one entry for being a subscriber. If you aren't a subscriber, then you can subscribe and then enter the giveaway. So yeah, let's talk about the books that I read this month, because I finished a significant number of books this month, at least for me. I usually read around like 6 to 8 books, and 8 is like a really good month. I think I finished like 12 this month. I tend to go into like hibernation mode in the winter time. When it gets really cold here in Chicago, I literally don't want to leave my house, so I was really into reading this month. So the first book that I finished this month was The Fireman by Joe Hill. This was actually a book I started at the end of November. This was a really interesting book. It takes place in like the near future, and there is this disease or virus or something along those lines that causes people to sort of go up in flames. At the beginning of the story, you are following this girl named Harper. It's her and her husband named Jacob, and they make this pact with each other that if either of them gets the disease, they are both going to simultaneously kill each other, because no one's really sure how the disease is spread, but it probably has to do with like proximity to other people who have the disease. So they know that if one of them catches it, the other one probably will soon as well. So they decide to make this pact, but then Harper actually does catch it, and she doesn't want to go through with the suicide, so she ends up like running away against her husband's wishes, and it just starts this whole like chain of events. I had very mixed feelings about this book. Parts of it I was really enjoying. I really like this world that Joe Hill created, and I really like the ideas that he's contemplating, and there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on here in terms of like fear-mongering, mob mentality, and the way that we react to difficult situations and all of this different stuff. But this book was way too long. I think it should have been cut a lot. There's also a significant number of references to Harry Potter. Like, the characters will mention different Harry Potter related things, and it really threw me off. Like, I feel like that totally took me out of this world completely. I think that was meant to just sort of like ground it in our reality, but because this is like a horror thriller, more on the thriller side than the horror side, because anyone who knows me knows I'm a big baby and I can't really handle true horror, but because it's on that side of the genre, it isn't really that realistic. So all of those really solid groundings in reality just always took me out of the story, and I didn't really like that. I thought the way it ended was really interesting. I do like the story overall, but I just think there were parts in the middle that really dragged for me. It just could have been cut down a lot. I think this book is over 700 pages long. I read it as an ebook, so I'm not completely sure. But yeah, it just felt really long. But overall, it's still really good. Joe Hill is a fantastic writer. If you haven't read him, I highly recommend him. I've read this and Horns, but I really think that the character development in here is fantastic, and it's just a really interesting story. And I do recommend it, but just be aware that it is long and the middle does drag a little bit, but I think that it's just a really interesting story. The next book that I finished was Talking as Fast as I Can by Lauren Graham. I actually listened to this on audiobook. It's a memoir from Lauren Graham, and she talks a lot about her acting life. If you are a fan of Gilmore Girls, you will like this because there's a lot of really interesting tidbits in here about the show and about the experience with the revival. I say this every time I read a celebrity memoir, but however you feel about the celebrity is how you're going to feel about the celebrity memoir. I love Lauren Graham so much, and so I love this memoir a whole lot. If you aren't a fan of Lauren Graham, I really don't think there's much need to pick up this book like, say, Amy Poehler's book, which I think has some greater ideas that she deals with. This was very much just like a straightforward, this is things that are happened in my life that I think you would be interesting sort of thing. Also, like I said, I listened to this on audiobook and Lauren Graham narrates it, and it was just like fantastic having her in the car with me. Like, I listened to this so quickly. I mean, the audiobook is only like 4 hours long, but usually it takes me forever to get through an audiobook, and this one I just like flew through because I loved listening to her talk. The next book that I finished was A Monster Calls by Patrick Nuss. This book was actually sent to me by the publisher in anticipation of the movie coming out, and this one I read in like an afternoon because it's really short. It's only like 200 pages long and the font is like ginormous. You've probably seen on BookTube other versions of this book where it's like the fully illustrated version. Unfortunately, I didn't get to have that, but I want to actually see if like my library has it or something like that because I've heard the illustrations are just beautiful. I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. It's really moving. It totally made me cry at the end. In this story, you are following this 13-year-old boy named Connor. At a specific time every night, this monster shows up outside of his house. It isn't the monster that he's expecting. He's been having a lot of nightmares and difficulty sleeping and things like that, and there's a lot of just things happening in his life. I don't want to go into specifics because I think it's more interesting if you read it and find it out for yourself, but it's a really interesting way of showing a kid having to deal with difficult situations and learning how to confront your fears and your nightmares about real life in this really sort of fantastical way. I think Patrick Nuss just does a really amazing job of making this kid a kid and showing the reader what it's like to be a kid and having to deal with really devastating circumstances. It was really beautiful. Like I said, it's a really quick read, so if you want something like short but really moving, this is a great book to pick up. And I'm really interested to see the movie because it looks really well done, and so hopefully it is well done. The next book that I read was Hidden Figures, which is a nonfiction book about these black women who worked for NASA. And yes, I did pick this up because it is being made into a movie, and yes, I'm absolutely going to see the movie in January when it's released widely. This book was really good because it provided a lot of context for the things that were happening in the United States that provided opportunities to women, and specifically these black women, to have these opportunities to work for NASA. Because if you think about this time period of like the 1940s, 1930s to about the 1960s, 1970s, you don't really think of black women having a lot of work opportunities. And so the fact that there were these amazing women who were able to eventually work at NASA is just absolutely fantastic. If you are someone who doesn't like nonfiction very much, this is a great book to pick up because it's relatively short. It's only about 200 and something pages. The last like 100 or so pages are all like notes, and it's a really quick read. I think that these women are really interesting and really does a great job of breaking down what it was like to be a woman even working at NASA. She talks very openly about the discrimination that they faced and the difficulties that they had to deal with because of segregation, and just all that they had to overcome in order to really grab these opportunities that were provided for them. It's really good. I highly recommend it. The next book that I finished was Americana, and I don't even know how to completely talk about this book. It was fantastic, just like everyone says it is. I do think I suffered a little bit from the hype machine just because I knew that it was going to be fantastic, so it didn't really quite like surprise me the way that I know it has other people, but that doesn't mean I didn't love it. If you aren't aware, this story follows this woman mainly named Ifemelu, hopefully I said that correctly, who grows up in Nigeria and eventually immigrates over to the United States and grows up in the United States, and it's about her and the love story between her and her boyfriend from Nigeria, and you watch them grow up and see how their lives just change as they're separated and how they eventually come back together, and what it's like growing up as an immigrant in the United States as well as in the United Kingdom, and also finding your identity in all of these different places, and when you go back home to your home country, what that's like. There's so much explored in here that's just fantastic. The main character in here is not very likable. She's very smart but also very stubborn and very judgmental herself, but I was still so intrigued by her. And just, oh, if you haven't read this book yet, I'm pretty sure I'm like one of the last people who've read this book, but if you haven't yet, definitely pick it up because it is worth all of the praise that it gets. The next book that I finished was Goulding Dance Volume 1. This is a relatively new comic from Boom Studios, and I had heard this described as like, if you like Nancy Drew or Veronica Mars, you should pick this up, and that is definitely what it's like. It's fun, it's filled with like women of color, and it's just a fun comic. And one of the great things about this comic is that in this volume there's one mystery that sort of goes over these like 5 or 6 issues that are in here, and then the mystery is solved. So you feel a sense of completion at the end of this volume, which is not a thing you necessarily feel at the end of like most comic book volumes, because a lot of times they have to like continue on the story. But the way that they set up Goulding Dance is that there's just this mystery that goes over this 5-6 issues, and there will obviously be more issues, but they'll just deal with another mystery. They don't leave you on like a cliffhanger. If you're someone who gets annoyed with comic books because they don't feel very complete at the end of volumes, pick up Goulding Dance because it's fun and you feel a sense of completion because you know how the mystery ends. And then I also finally read Ms. Marvel's Volume 4 and 5. I love Ms. Marvel. I will always read Ms. Marvel, especially if G. Willow Wilson continues writing it. She is a fantastic character, and if you are someone who doesn't normally like superhero books, I recommend trying her out because I feel like she is a superhero, obviously, and there are supernatural elements blended into the story, but I think that there's so much character depth and development and so many different conflicts that Ms. Marvel deals with that feel very real to life, especially being a brown teenage girl in New Jersey. It's just so well done. I love it. The next thing that I finished was Shrill by Lindy West. This is a collection of essays from Lindy West, who is mainly known for her writing online and for being a feminist and for being fat and talking about that on the internet. I actually listened to this on audiobook because that was highly recommended, and I did really enjoy listening to it on audiobook. I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. I liked it, I didn't love it, but that's mainly how I also feel about Lindy West's writing in general. I think also just a lot of the discussions she has in here are discussions that I've already heard either from her or from other writers online. Like the whole thing about the rape jokes and comedians, I ended up skipping over part of that chapter just because I feel like I'd heard it all before. I'd heard the arguments before from both sides and I wasn't really getting anything new from it, so I just skipped over that chapter. If you are someone who likes essay collections, if you like feminist writing, I still think that even if you don't consider yourself a feminist, you should read this book because she talks a lot about like weight and self-love and relationships that I think were really, really beautiful and totally relatable. So yeah, I gave this 3 out of 5 stars, but I really liked some of the essays in here. I think they were just so well done. The next book that I finished was What Lies Between Us. This was one of my favorite books of the year, and I'm not going to talk about it too much here because I talked about it in that video and I'm going to do a full review on it, and also my battery is about to die, so I'm going to try to get through this quickly. But in this book you are following this woman. In the beginning of the story you find out something has happened between her and her daughter, and then you flash back in time and you see her in Sri Lanka and you watch her grow up and lead up to the point where this big event happened. So it's part mystery, part family story, part just tragedy. It's beautiful and heartbreaking, and I really, really loved it, and I can't wait to talk about it more in a full review. Next, I finished The Other Slavery. The subtitle to this is The Uncovered Story of Indian Enslavement in America by Andres Resendez. It means America in the broad sense because it talks about Indian enslavement in like Mexico and the Caribbean and things like that as well. But yeah, this book was good. It definitely provides everyone, including myself, with a part of history that I didn't know anything about. I think that if you are someone who likes US history, definitely give this a read. This book is a little bit drier, I will admit that, so if you're someone who normally doesn't read nonfiction, it might be harder for you to read this, but I definitely think this is a book worth reading, and I'm glad that it exists because I feel like this will be a good reference point for a lot of people because these stories and this information hasn't really been collected. So I'm really glad that this exists and I'm really glad that I read it. And then the final book that I read this month was The Invasion of the Tearling, which is the second book in the Queen of the Tearling series. I like this book. I didn't like it quite as much as I like Queen of the Tearling just because of the flashback scenes that happen in the story. I'm not going to talk about the plot because, again, it's the second book in a series. I understand that the flashbacks provided context for this world and helped explain like how this whole Tearling situation exists. It just felt like a completely separate book, and I wasn't quite as invested in that side of the story as I was with the Kelsey side of the story. But I'm definitely intrigued to see how it all ends. I'm currently on hold for the third book in the series, and so whenever that comes in, I will read it. I don't know if this one is necessarily more violent than the first one, but it felt more violent. I don't know if I've just forgotten how violent the first one was. It felt like there were a lot more swears and just a lot more like gruesome death scenes, but that also just might be a product of the fact that there's a lot of horrible stuff happening in the kingdom, so that might have just been it as well. But yeah, just a reminder that this is not young adult. This is very violent, very crude, not crude, but there's like swearing and gory scenes, so don't give this to children. But I definitely think it's worth picking up. There's a lot of really great ideas about gender and beauty and worth explored in here that I find really, really intriguing, and that's sort of what keeps me going through this book. So yeah, that is everything. My battery is about to die like I mentioned earlier, so I'm just going to wrap things up here. If you've read any of these books, definitely leave a comment down below letting me know what you guys thought of them. You can always follow me on Goodreads if you are interested in seeing what I'm currently reading or what I'm reading throughout the month. Next week is Bout of Books. I just wanted to mention that as well. I'll have a link down below, but it's a week-long readathon. I love participating in it, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to participate in it this round as well because, you know, it's the beginning of the year and it's a good way to kick things off. So on Monday you will be seeing a TBR video from me. But yeah, that's all I have for now, and thanks for watching.